It's funny they released. Well, I mean, I don't want. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. It's funny because what we call this show Ren and Snippy, and I expected Ahsoka to turn around to Sabine Wren and be like, "You idiots! Look at what you have done! You gave the map away to the enemy."
What are you doing? Oh!
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was expecting. Somewhat from their reunion, but no, we'll get into that. That's, I guess, a spoiler, but everyone kind of like knows
They
this
could have
stuff.
done a Thrawn song to Log, you know.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh
no!
my god. Who is
Hello.
which character is this now? Is that who is that the pirate?
That's pretty good.
The space
So
pirate.
scary.
I can't remember the space pirate's name, but
Yeah,
no.
anybody you want it to be. Is this a random mask and a helmet?
John, you're such a handsome guy, and that Mr. Hyde isn't your best look, I don't think.
Yeah. I don't know. Right now I can't even understand what he's saying, which is how I imagine a stormtrooper actually sounds. You know.
Yeah, no wonder they can't shoot worth shit. They can't see anything.
Now, Luke says that in the New Hope. He says, "I can't see a thing in this helmet."
Exactly.
Right.
I can't even hear myself.
But I'd like to welcome everyone to Ren and Stimpy because that idiot gave away the map. But joking aside, yeah, but we didn't do the 6th episode the week it came out because we had a screening for The Creator, which I was just like lukewarm on. And I know, Jeff, you were not a fan of it at all, which
No,
I agreed with a lot of what you said with it. You know, it is
it's
very
well
derivative.
produced. It's beautiful cinematography and some top-notch special effects. So many of those films these days have that, but my God, it was so derivative, and I just was all the destruction and violence. I got really irritated with it after a while. So maybe it just hit me really wrong, but yeah, not an enjoyable movie for me.
Yeah, it kind of did the same problem I had with District 9, where I was really invested in the story in the first few minutes when it wasn't so much action and they were like kind of using that fake documentary style to set up the story. And then they get into the action and it just ditches any sort of thought or creativity for explosions and constant mayhem. And that's the same exact problem I found with this movie, which is why I was like, this is like District 9, where it feels realistic, but then it gets ridiculous. I mean, it gets ridiculous in the beginning when there's that huge explosion and Maya's supposed to survive. Like, really? It was like that.
How many people have to die just so she can live? I mean, that's the other thing. There's so much destruction. And you know, it's funny, John, when I was watching that movie, I was actually thinking about these 2 episodes that we've just watched and what you basically foretold in a sort of soothsayer kind of way of those 3 witches that are helping Thrawn here. I want to call them Macbeth's witches. They're clearly an homage. But I kept thinking about how you were saying that these are going to be really incredible episodes and so cinematic. And it's so funny. I mean, we all talked about it last time, but that episode 5 was released into the theaters and stuff. My God, I think 6 and 7 look just as good, if not maybe in some respects more impressive, because they were really expensive kind of fights. You know, it wasn't just Ahsoka versus Anakin on that long sort of walkway, runway or whatever, but I mean, this, I have to say, and I'll just quickly say, again, I'm not the expert that you guys have, but you guys are, but I thought this was easily the most satisfying Star Wars stuff I've seen in the streaming format, and maybe the most compelling blend of character and philosophy and action and even critters. I loved that howler too, since really maybe the first 3 movies. I mean, I was that impressed.
Yep. I've been saying that since the beginning, man. Like, this is the best Star Wars that we're gonna get maybe in our lifetime. There's nothing for me to complain about. Like, I was complaining up and down about Andor. Like, that story went nowhere. It went a bunch of circles and went literally, like, nothing happened in that whole story. It was 12 episodes of what? Like
16.
There you go. Yeah, it was too many episodes of what exactly? This is every episode, almost every second is just whiz bang, awesome, cool, fun stuff. Like you said, the witches, the production value, the music behind the production, and the sound quality and the sound design overall has just been it's been getting better as we get towards episode 8, and I can't wait for this finale. It's obviously going to be movie quality. Like
Well,
they've
it already
taken
is,
the
yeah.
steps to get us this far. If we've learned anything from the Disney era of Star Wars, they saved the best for last. They literally wrote Kenobi from the last episode backwards. That's obvious when you watch it. You know, that last episode was all it was for Kenobi. And that's kind of where they're going with this entire series with Ahsoka. And let me just say that Ahsoka is, in my mind, it is Rebels season 5, but it's only chapter 1. The entire season of Ahsoka is only Rebels season 5, chapter 1. Like, it's from Ahsoka's point of view. Obviously, they had to focus on Sabine and get her into it, so there's a lot of Sabine. You know, nobody knows who Sabine is. We kind of learned who Ahsoka was from Boba Fett and from Mandalorian, so people kind of knew that. So they kind of had to force Sabine on us a little bit with a bunch of episodes focused on. So I get that, but oh my goodness, Ahsoka jumping out of airplanes and barrel rolling straight into lightsabers, and oh my goodness, this is the Ahsoka that we knew in the cartoons, and it's live action animation, like I've been saying since.
And she's got that kind of the pale rider Shane, kind of a little bit morose early on, but now after she's become sort of Ahsoka the White, she's got this confidence and this wherewithal and knowingness. You know, I mean, I think that's what was you kind of scared off Baylan Skoll a little bit. Like, it's like, okay, she's really kind of got her shit together. And even Thrawn had to admit that, you know, she was studying with Anakin Skywalker. Fuck, that's not going to help me. You know, but she seems very positive. And, you know, when she held Sabine from shooting at Shin, you know, and like just that kind of confidence. You don't have to kill them all, and you know, let's see what happens. Just that confidence in her character change alone is a nice part of the arc, I think.
Yeah, well, she's very much the Aragorn from Return of the King right now. I want to see the rest of
this
movie. I want to see the rest of Return of the King Star Wars style and see her just.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting. I liked episode 5 more. Or I'm sorry, I should say episode 6 more than 7, just because that one finally introduced Thrawn, and it was an incredible entrance. Because like I have a home theater, so like my subwoofer was going crazy when that Star Destroyer starts entering. Yeah, the frame. And then when you finally get that reveal of Thrawn, you have these stormtroopers who, there was a theory that they were like night troopers, like the Night Sisters revived dead guys and made them stormtroopers again. I don't know if that's true after how easily disposed they were by episode 7. But this was an episode that set up a lot of stakes. And you finally get to see like where these things are going to happen. You get the idea that Ahsoka is going to come back. She's going to get fired upon. Things are going to go south, and it's building up towards that. If there's one funny thing about Ahsoka, there's surprisingly very little Ahsoka in Ahsoka. These show episodes outside of episode 5, they've kind of been about like all these other characters, mostly about Sabine reuniting with Ezra Bridger. When we finally got them reuniting, it was a pretty nice scene. But if I'm just wondering if someone isn't familiar with the cartoon shows, what are they feeling when they see Thrawn and they see Sabine and Ezra hook up? Well, I wonder how that feels.
It was awesome. Like being somebody that's watched 7 seasons of. You know, what is it? 7 seasons of the Clone Wars plus 4 seasons of Rebels plus. I didn't watch the entirety of Resistance. That got old real quick, but like, there's so much cartoon content out there for those of us that have watched all of it. To have Thrawn come in like this was fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a great entrance.
The Night Sisters and the magic side of it. Like, I've been screaming about that since day one. Like, Star Wars is half magic, and we haven't seen a source of magic or magicians. Nobody's really mentioned it aside from people using the Force. But what is the Force? It's literally the ability to harness magic and use it.
It's witchcraft in its own sense.
Oh my goodness! Like, the introduction of Thrawn was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, Mike and John, you guys are the experts at this. And you said, like, how is somebody who's, maybe not as familiar with the characters going to say, like, where did Ahsoka go for episode 6? It was basically Sabine's show where they're really giving her time and attention and all of her interaction with Howell. And it dawned on me that I think in some respects what these Star Wars series are going for is their template. More often than not, seem to not necessarily be the movies or maybe even the cartoon shows, though I don't know enough about them to speak with authority. But there seems to be a comic book feel to this. And let me just expound on that for a second. A lot of times in comic books, they will have, like I was a big Brian Michael Bendis fan, and he would do all these things. And there would be issues that would come out like, where's the main character? I guess they had the week off, and he'll tell a backstory of this villain or this side character, how we got to this one thing. And I think this is doing that. They did it quite a bit in the other series that I've watched. And you wonder, like, is Pascal doing the other series now? Is that why he's not in this episode? But I think their template is kind of this comic book feel. And I'll tell you the scene that really drove it home for me. And it's very Star Wars, but it's also very, very comic book. And it was in episode 6, where Sabine is out there looking for Ezra, and she's out in the desert with her howler, and she doesn't think the howler is really helping guide her much, and she kind of like dismisses it and says, just stay. I'm going to do this on my own, go to walk here. And the camera sits there on this widescreen frame, and you see her leave, and the howler goes the other way, and it just sits there, and I'm sitting there going, 1,000, 2,000. And I think at 6, finally that howler sheepishly enters the frame and then follows her. And then, of course, he sniffs around and finds, the Nodi, the hermit crabs that I think always look like turtle Jar Jar Binks with their similar eyes. But anyway.
Turtle Gungans.
Yeah, there you go. But that way that you would see a comic book page very cheekily done by a lot of comic book artists, which would have those 5 blank frames where nothing is in them until the last frame where the howler's snout comes to back into it. And that's how they would do it in a comic book. And you'd laugh like hell. And the same thing is here. I'm laughing like, how long are they going to prolong this? It's almost like Sideshow Bob with the rake in The Simpsons. How many times does he hit that rake before they say, okay, we've exhausted this? I think it's 16 times, but here they go all those seconds. I thought that's fantastic that they take the time, build that tension, build that comedy, and just let us sort of enjoy the fact that it isn't just the Ahsoka show. It's not just Rosario Dawson. It's the Star Wars world and these creatures and these villains and everything else. I love the fact that Lars Mikkelsen is given tons of time to just think on screen. You see him thinking, and then you see him being the Grand Master, not only the Grand Admiral, he's a Grandmaster chess player. Like, oh, is that what we're... Well, let's do this then. And, what's her name? Morgan, I guess. Is that the woman who's
Morgan
looking at him like,
Elsbeth?
like, what really? And he's, he's so far ahead of her. It's like, here's your checkerboard, young lady, and here's my chessboard. That's 3 dimensions. And I just love that they give that kind of time. And that's what they do in comic books. And that's what they've been doing in this series to great, great effect.
Yeah, this is sort of...
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because, like, everybody's question, like, who is Thrawn? What is Thrawn? What's his deal? Like, why is he so special? But if somebody that hasn't read comic books or any of the stories, or has, a little bit of Rebels knowledge coming into it of who Thrawn is, can figure out who he is within the first 10 seconds of seeing him on screen, that's fantastic, man. They did an excellent job of getting this character across immediately with who he is, what he's about, what he can do. What he can, like, as soon as he saw Sabine Wren on his bridge or whatever, he knew that the fate of the entire galaxies that he was aware of was going to change. Like, he knew at that moment, having Sabine Wren in front of him, he's like, oh, okay, all right, things are changing right now. I'm making decisions. I'm already 25 steps ahead of everything that I thought I was going to be doing before this point. But as soon as he saw her, he's like, he switches gears, and you can see that on screen. You can see him contemplate, you can see him compute. And Jeff, that is amazing that's coming through to somebody that doesn't know who Thrawn is or was coming into this. That's what they wanted to do. It's like,
because I was worried audiences would see him and be like, everyone's scared of that fat guy? Like, why is everyone what's so intimidating about him?
But I love the fact, too, that, there's these wonderful little comparisons and contrasts that almost beg you to watch it a second time to just appreciate those nuances. Like I love the fact that when Balin's skull is sort of thrown for a loop, he's not sure what to do. Where Thrawn is, and he's sitting there like Bobby Fischer, going, "Okay, Boris Spassky took my knight. I really wanted to keep that knight, but I still have this rook over here, and I don't think that my opponent knows what I'm going to do with it." And that's where Martha's like, she just doesn't get it. And it's funny. One of the things we talked about often in regards to the last Mandalorian episode is some of it. While they're doing some of that, pause and effect for drama and character development or thinking on screen and stuff, it often felt like filler to me, even though I liked the series much better than most of the people I was doing the Ian Simmons show with. But here, I thought all of the pauses and the waiting and wondering, you were really seeing the characters contemplate what was going on here and having to think about it. And it was fascinating because I think it shows you that there is strategy to what they're doing, particularly Thrawn. He's not like knows everything. I mean, he's thinking it through. And it's like, oh, that's why he's such a clever guy. And even when he's facing, to your point, John, like, okay, this is kind of changing this, and maybe I have to go to the different galaxy for this, and maybe I should just call this one a day and retreat and get my stormtroopers and Shin back or whatever. That's part of a bigger plan, a bigger strategy that maybe Balin can't see, certainly Martha can't see, and maybe the audience can't see, but we see him seeing it. And that's fascinating to watch because it's like, wow, what is going on there? I got to think about that while I'm watching him. And I love it when you see characters think on screen. And Ahsoka does some of that here too. It's really well done in this series.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's dragged out.
Yeah,
like it does in some shows or other pieces of media. You'll see someone say a line and they wait. Actually, Obi-Wan had some pacing issues like that. Like I know there was a scene where Darth Vader's in his throne room, and he's like literally in the framing my frame is right now, and he gets up, and it's just like crotch level, and it's on that shot for about like 3 seconds, and I'm like. Well, not 3 seconds. That's exaggerating, but it was on there.
You would think they would have cut before they wasted time showing that part of him that isn't particularly compelling.
Yeah, and like that Obi-Wan had issues like that all over, where like the actor would say the line, and the actors are supposed to be thinking, but really it's not adding anything to the scene, and then they say the line. With Ahsoka, especially with Thrawn, there's those moments where, Thrawn is talking to the Night Sisters, and he'll pause and he'll say, tell me about this. Why did and then he'll end up creating a strategy quite quickly where, maybe somebody else couldn't. Like you could tell he's much more of a strategist than Darth Vader was. And he's about as intelligent as the Emperor. Well, who knows about his intelligence, the Emperor, but pretty darn intelligent, which is why he was his second in command. And it's great that you got that in the beginning, because you get from just the organs and the horn music. I mean, Kevin Kiner's score is on point when they introduce Thrawn. And when you hear that, you immediately get, oh, wow, this guy is a threat. He survived for 10 years here.
There's a little bit of a feel of Succession with Thrawn too, I thought, because like when I watch Darth Vader and all the old stuff, and even to some degree the way Hayden Christensen plays him, there's a rashness to him, and then turns into brashness. Like he'll cut somebody off when they're talking and he doesn't like what they're saying, and they'll start to choke. It's like almost like he's a drill sergeant getting in his peons' faces, and yelling at them or so this. Where Thrawn plays it like he's the goddamn guy in the corner office, the CEO. Like, so why would you do this? Or tell me, what would you do here? Or what are we thinking? Like testing them to see if they're good, like if they're worthy of being in his inner circle. And I promoted you to this, and you're kind of in control of these 3 soothsaying witches, but should I really be trusting you? Because I think you're not only watching him assess the Jedi, like when the Jedi beat him, he goes like, oh, it's like the Jedi of old. I mean, he was almost enjoying it, like this is an actual challenge. But I love his challenging of all of the people around him. You really see he's a shrewd player.
Yeah. And I think Lars Mikkelsen was great to keep him cast in that role, because he has that slow, sort of methodical voice.
Yes.
In a way where it's very iconic to his character. And to bring it to live action, I was a little concerned, because people on the internet were joking that he looked like Elon Musk and stuff like that. Yeah, which, I didn't see that, but okay.
But I think his look is almost, I mean, I know this is going to sound like sacrilege, but for me anyway, it almost seems like his look is somewhat inconsequential because there's a foreignness to so many characters in it. I mean, their eye color. I'm still not over Rosario Dawson, with her blue eyes. It's like she's got such big, dark, rich eyes in all of her other films. And here, she's a little bit in disguise because of that. But man, once he starts moving and just the way he holds his head and he waits on delivery line, I mean, he's very much like Ray Stevenson too, who's, he cuts a certain formidable figure, but the way he moves his figure, the way he uses his voice, but especially Mikkelsen, he is the man. I mean, he may seem a little pudgy or, Elon Musk-esque in his looks and hair or whatever, but I got past that pretty quick because he's intimidating as hell.
Yeah.
And this is like, we're all benefiting from the Filoni effect too. Like he's got these people who have already honed these characters. Like Lars Mikkelsen has been Thrawn for years already.
Oh yeah,
like 4 seasons in. I mean, he wasn't introduced until the 2nd season, I believe, but like he's been Thrawn for quite a while already. So he already owned that character. He already knew the voice pacing. He already knew the stalling, the buildup of tension within his own voice, and to get that character and have that presence literally on screen behind the voice, it's just like. I don't know, like, was Disney set up for Filoni just to take over Star Wars?
Well, he's done a hell of a job, hasn't he? I mean, this is really firing on all cylinders.
How can you expect anybody to step in and be like, this is what's like? Nobody can do Star Wars now, in my mind. Like, it's got to be his show going forward. And he's got to have his hands in every single project, or it's going to feel like sequel era again and not worth watching again. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's his job.
So much more fun back to Star Wars that he's got a helmet. He absolutely has to helm.
Yeah, well, I think that's what they're kind of right now. I feel like Dave Filoni is giving us the Star Wars sequel we wanted to have, because we essentially the sequels we got, you could tell they were rushed to the door. When Episode 7 first came out, I was admittedly like over the floor thrilled with it. I knew it was a cheap script. I knew that, they just basically copied everything from Episode 4, but I didn't care because it felt like Star Wars. And then The Last Jedi came out, and I'm one of the few people who wasn't very thrilled with it. I liked Rian Johnson's ideas behind it, but I didn't like his execution. I felt like he kind of made a cheap comedy. And then when Rise of Skywalker came out, I just could tell that was Disney hitting the panic button, not knowing what to do, and grabbing J.J. Abrams because Episode 7 worked out so well. Here, you get something where you get a creator who's making something bigger, and it's going to pay off more. And they're kind of doing it, like you were saying, Jeff, about the comic book effect. Like, you kind of see what Marvel does with their MCU products and how they kind of stretch them out into television shows. Except we've already gotten so many MCU films, we don't really want more. And with Star Wars, is always split across 3 trilogies. And here it's like we're taking that time in between the trilogy to finally fill in those gaps that had me wondering when I was watching the sequels, wait, who the hell is the First Order? How did these guys rise to power after the Emperor was defeated? Why is there a resistance? And now you're finally seeing Dave Filoni set that up, and that is, very satisfying to watch.
Well, one thing I must say, and it's a compliment to you two guys too, because I keep thinking of you in the show when I'm watching the show. But I think Filoni has also approached this with not only the skills and talents as a writer and a filmmaker, but he understands the history and the continuity. This is the one thing that I think has been the problem with some of the Star Wars movies, at least the last 3 that were done, and in some respects parts of the series too, is I think every new writer who comes on it, of course, always wants to make their name and their bones, and they write some different things, but they'll do things that are like maybe funny bits as a writer, but they're not right for Star Wars. I'll give you an example of it. They never really developed the Poe Dameron character properly in any of the 3 movies. And Oscar Isaac is one of the actors of his generation. I mean, he's really terrific. And if you've ever seen like, some of the stuff like the thing he won the Golden Globe for on Showtime, Show Me a Hero, or the miniseries he did with Jessica Chastain. He can play small and be fascinating. But in the last episode, the last of the 3 movies that he was in, do you remember he kept repeating everything? Like, did you hear him say that? Did you hear him say that? He said that, didn't he? He said, and repetition is funny in comedy. But that character wouldn't be saying those kind of things over and over again, like he's, some sort of, neurotic New Yorker or something. It was out of character. Here, all the comedy or the slyness they have is in character. Like when, and I'm forgetting now. Sorry, I was doing well on remembering the names. The robot character that's Ahsoka's foil throughout.
Hu Yang?
Yeah. When he is sitting there watching this go on, and he's like, "Oh, I hope I survive to watch all this." That's what he would say. It's a funny line, but it's in his character. It's not a joke line. It's a character line. Like, he's a little bit of a Nelly, but not too much of a Nelly, but just like that would be his legitimate worry. Not like, did you hear him say that? Did you hear him say that? Like Poe Dameron is doing. The other one is, I loved the time they gave Dawson and the curl of her lip, which is about the first thing we've seen in this whole series where Dawson plays Dawson a little bit when she says, about when she finally gets to sort of relax and they send Shin scammering and she says, "And miss this reunion?" That's what Ahsoka would say. She's sly like that. It's like, she's not going to be over giddy or, she's got this coolness, this confidence. She is this Jedi and stuff. And I just thought that's the difference. You're writing the character's wit, not wit for the character.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. And she doesn't seem like, everyone complained that she was stoic, and here she has a lot more personality. I mean, she's meant to be.
She was stoic until Anakin beat her ass.
Yeah,
she woke up. She was like,
I was about to say she seemed a little different when she became Ahsoka the White.
Yep.
That's when she ended up having more of a personality. I think before that she was just very defeated and down. Because I don't.
But she was also waiting. Like, I think she was watching to see what happens. There was always a I compared her to a cat in my review, saying that she's kind of like interesting, just watching and waiting. Like, I don't have to bat you around just yet, little Mr. Mouse. I'm just going to watch and see what you do first. And I felt there was a little bit of that, which is very Shane, very Pale Rider, very Clint Eastwood in its way. But when she became Ahsoka the White, she's suddenly like more confident, more charming. I mean, there was no way that she was going to lose to Balin. In fact, I think Balin realized that he wasn't going to beat her. So it was like, shit, I got to reprogram this whole attitude thing because I don't know what this new, better Ahsoka version.
Yeah, and they'll probably square off for the last episode. But the dumbest thing Filoni could do, which I don't think he'd be dumb enough to do, is have them kill off Thrawn or something like that. That would be stupid. Thrawn has to get out of that galaxy so then he can get into the one everyone's at and he can start formulating his plan because that's what he's for. He's there to build the First Order, I think.
By the way, let me ask you both this too, since you're such aficionados, but I don't know if I've ever seen a more beautiful image in a Star Wars movie than those space whales floating through there and going different speeds and stuff. And then I love the fact that they even sort of Jonah and the whale, the ship, to give them safe transport, sort of hidden. I just thought that all in the grace of those special effects, that's impressive too, because they spent the money to make that look absolutely ideal.
Yeah, it looks like Space Odyssey a little bit when they were going through the black hole. Like, it had the same kind of color scheme that Bowman was going through.
Interesting.
But they didn't make it, horrifying and screwing it with Ligeti or anything like that.
And these again are just things that were benefiting from the Filoni era. Like, he did so much work on the cartoons that he just knew exactly what he was going to do when he was like handed the keys to the live action universe. The pausing, the Kurosawa, just all of it. He knew what he was doing when he came into this, and it's so obvious. And like me and Mike are on this side being huge Star Wars fan, and we're enjoying the hell out of it. And I'm so happy that somebody that wasn't so into the cartoons can get just as much out of it as we are. That is fantastic. That makes me know that he really knows what he's doing.
Well, that's funny, John, too. Good.
I was going to say, like, one thing that we haven't touched on is that this like this filler series that we're talking about, like there are actual stakes here. Like we don't know the story of Ahsoka, so like it's cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger, versus a fill-in story with Solo, where they come in and it's like, oh, Solo's in danger, or Lando's like, no, they're not. They're going to be fine. We see them years later when they survive this situation. So it's like the stakes are high. Like we don't know the outcome of where Ahsoka's character had, like where is she come the sequels? Like what is it? Like that is fantastic to me. Like the question marks over her head still after 7 years of Rebel or of Clone Wars, 4 years of Rebels, and now this. Like there's still question marks over this character, and that is fantastic. Like we didn't need the questions answered in Solo that we had answered, but we do need all of these questions that we don't even know that are questions answered for Ahsoka. Like that's been fantastic. I've been loving that part of it.
John, to that point, if you don't mind me interrupting for a second, Mike, I know I don't want to usurp your questions, but I think it's a key thing here too. And we talked about this. I think it was one of your issues, Mike, with this last season of The Mandalorian. There were some scenes and some episodes that, were maybe played a little lighter and more comedically. And there's things like that all the time. But to John's point about stakes, there's not only big stakes here, but in every scene, there's some sort of stake. Like, and there's this old cliche that they say to writers, but it's a key one. And I dare say some of The Mandalorian forgot that from episode to episode. It's like, what's really at stake here? What is the tension in this scene? Because even the scenes that are going to be expositional or maybe a little bit lighter, there still has to be some give and take between something that somebody has and something that the other person doesn't have and maybe wants, either literally or in a intimacy kind of mode or whatever. And here there's that throughout. I mean, when they had the General Syndulla's potential court-martial, it's like it's the scene that isn't going to end up in a court-martial, and yet they don't play it like that. I mean, it's that senator who was questioning her was pretty intimidating, and he wasn't a fool. He wasn't, the 9 times out of 10, a director would have probably filled that with some Polonius windbag, like, well, and no, this is a young, handsome guy who looks like he's got his shit together and probably a big star, and all that kind of stuff. And it's formidable. And so there's real stakes there. There's real tension. And these two going at each other is pretty good. And even, the way the female running it character, I forget her name now.
Sabine Wren? Or not Sabine Wren, Hera Syndulla?
No, the woman who's kind of presiding over when she talks about like Princess Leia really didn't do that, did she? Senator Leia, whatever you like. Yeah. I mean, that's her tension. She's sitting there like she could still get the General Syndulla in trouble, so it's like there's stakes in each of these things. Like I'm I can't just walk through this scene where I'm not affected or I couldn't lose. And I think that's one of the great things about this episode is there's something that could lose. I mean, remember in The Mandalorian when they were doing the training out there and all these games and stuff like that. I mean, it was fun and kind of filler, but it was like, is there any real stake here other than who's going to win this little challenge? Not really.
To make it interesting.
Exactly. But here, everything has some real tension and some real stakes. And even if there's smaller stakes, they fit into it. I mean, if I'm those 3 witches and Morgan, anytime Grand Admiral Thrawn asks me a question, I'm like, fuck, is this the end of me? Because if I don't answer this right, I may be out on my ass or maybe even kills me. So yeah, that's a nice little bit of stakes in every scene he's in.
Yeah, well, Thrawn did it. I remember there was an episode of Rebels where Thrawn had someone try out a speeder bike, although like its engine was bad, and if they went full speed, they would explode and die. And he just did it for his own personal amusements. Like yeah, that's the kind of guy Thrawn is. He is a general who has it together, who knows where he is 10 steps ahead of you, and that's the guy the galaxy is going to have to worry about coming back. And we're not just watching a show about a character where we know if they're going to die already or not. When we watch Andor, we know Andor died. When we watch the Clone Wars, we know Anakin became Darth Vader and is going to die. We know with Solo, with the blah, 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 blah. this is a show about a character where we don't know her future yet, and we're wondering she could die in it, or she could not.
Smart.
And I think the smartest thing for them to do is to keep her character going and put her in the subsequent movies they're going to make. But we'll see how far they get with that, because at that point, when the sequels come out, and then the sequel after the sequels, Ahsoka's gonna be much older. She's gonna be in a cane like Yoda. So,
John and Mike, I was so worried about the stakes in this last episode that I was worried that the Howler and the Nodi might get laser blasted in those huts that they were hiding. And it's like, no, don't kill off that cute Howler.
Yeah, don't kill the turtles.
Don't kill. They didn't kill any of those people really, which was good. And even like,
they're peaceful
I
people.
think to steal Balin's Howler to go after they had their little skirmish. I mean, it's like, I love the fact that, they saved the cat, if you will, as, that old screenwriting book says, always save the animals if you can, because people don't want to see animals die.
Yeah.
Even if they're creatures in fantasy land, they still are.
During the Mad Max Fury Road sequence, like, she could have just as easily been picking off the Howlers,
Yes.
the dogs one by one.
Right.
Because, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you don't play video games, Jeff, but that's what you do. When you're being chased by a bunch of, like, you shoot the horse.
Yeah, for sure. And how many movies have we seen?
None of the good guys died. None of the horses died. Like, all of the good, quote unquote, good people, like, survived that fight. That was amazing. Like, they did a really good job of working around. Because if I was like an 8-year-old kid watching this, it'd be like, please don't shoot the dogs, please. And they don't.
Right.
Well, that's a very Disney thing of them.
The stormtroopers when they're running away, and they have a code to not shoot them in the back. Like there's I mean, that's a kind of a good little lesson for the kids to watch. Like, they're fighting, but they're being dignified and playing fair.
I don't know if they have a code or if they're just stormtroopers and they can't aim and they're just shooting all.
Running away to sort of retreat along with Thrawn,
that's true.
You could have said, well, we're going to get rid of these 10 that are left. It's like, but they didn't. I mean, Ahsoka was kind of zen about it. It's like, if they don't bring the fight to us, we don't need to make extra carnage.
Yeah, well, that's where Thrawn is smart. He's saying, all right, keep these guys alive because we're buying time to get away, and already we've delayed them. I think if he sent more men, it would have delayed them even further. And then they would have had more time to get away. But then again, he probably would have lost resources that he could have used.
He only has one goal, and that's to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
That's all he wants to do.
He wants to go to a galaxy a little less far away.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering how he thought that why he didn't send more men, because wouldn't that stall them longer if he sent more? Like, even if he did waste them, there's still like Imperial remnants throughout the universe that he could have used.
I think his plan changed as soon as Morgan handed him that tablet.
Yes.
And he learned who her master was. I don't know if you know this, Jeff, but Grand Admiral Thrawn knows exactly who Anakin Skywalker is and who Vader is.
That's right. He knows that he's Vader,
doesn't he? He knows
doesn't
that they are both the same person. So as soon as he got that tablet and he figured out that Vader was her boss, basically, everything changed. He's like, oh, she's going to be crazy unpredictable, just like Anakin and Vader. So my plan is going to change right here, right now, pull everybody back.
Yeah, she's got some tricks that she's learned from him as such a chosen one or one of the better people. The other thing too is, I mean, again, I don't want to overdo the chess analogy, but most chess players win by keeping their pawns around, and he's keeping his pawns around.
Exactly. They're very useful. If you get them to the other side of the board, they become extremely
That's
useful.
the difference between, I think, a champion and somebody who comes close. But like, you're going to sometimes have to give up a bishop or a rook, or maybe they'll be taking you and you'll be mad about it. But if you can hang on to 4 or 5 pawns and you get 1 or 2 of those to the other way, they become queens. And the other thing is pawns can always be in the way, like you can hide behind a pawn in a chess game. And so anyway, I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, Thrawn is smart enough to save his men and live and fight another day.
Yeah. Well, that's why I could never be Thrawn, because my strategy was to send more men and delay them longer.
You're the first. You're Kylo. You would fail immediately.
Yeah, I would fall to the dark side so easily, I would fall to the dark side of the drop of a hat. I know me.
Mike, there would be plenty of room for you to succeed, though, in Undercover Boss as Kylo Ren when he.
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say though, the show does feel the most like Star Wars I've seen in a while.
Yes.
You know, it's fun and exciting, but it's also dark and menacing. But it balances the two very well, where it's mostly fun. But you know, but it's not too much fun. And luckily, the whole show hasn't become like a rescue mission. As a matter of fact, I don't think this film became or this show became a rescue mission. And it could have been like, yeah, there was the rescue mission. It literally says it in the title of one of the episodes. It says to embark on a rescue mission, you know, to find Sabine and save her. But really, it's to stop Thrawn. And this show works is because we have a clear antagonist and one that we can stick with for many, many, many more shows as the years go on. And we're finally going to see the Star Wars sequel we wished we got. You know, and that's something real special. And again, thanks to Dave Filoni for that. And Dave Filoni has one of the most like thankless jobs, which has become thankful among fans, which is it's like, all right, here's episode 2 and 3. Everyone hates it. Write something to make everybody like it. Okay, here's the sequel trilogy. Everybody hates it. Write something so everybody likes it. And he's got to do that again. And here he's succeeding with Ahsoka. And it's so pleasing to see. I do like how Ahsoka sort of is this thoughtful character, you know, a little different than the show. Because like in the show, she was thoughtful, but she was much more, you know, wry and witty. And here she was much more of kind of like how you imagine a Jedi would be. But it makes sense in terms of the context of the show, considering, you know, her master's fall and, you know, basically the rise of the Empire, re-rise of it. You know, she knows things are going to come around in sequences. There's a great bit from Balin's Skull. And I think it was in episode 6 where he says, you know, the dark side, the light side, these things happen where there's a rise and a fall, and it happens again
and again. Yeah. It's very good. That was very good.
You know,
it's almost like politics, you know, one party wins, then the next party wins later, you know, and it kind of becomes
that's right there. That's been like the whole of Star Wars since day one. It doesn't matter who's in power. There's corruption all over the place. It's the bad guys, it's the good guys. Shit's gonna go wrong no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, isn't it funny too how like the good guys always seem to be caught up in minutia. They're missing a lot of the big picture, you know, as opposed to you know, them ragging on Syndulla over something that, you know, really at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, but there's this bigger thing that she's kind of worried about.
And that's exactly why they're so easy to fall.
That's right.
They're just so like,
that's right,
concentrated on stuff that they just don't. They're like you just said, they're not big picture focused, and the Empire is. So when you go from that big picture focus to little picture focus, and you just have that tug of war back and forth constantly, you're going to get the rise of an empire and the fall of a resistance, and then the rise of a first order, and you know, it's just gonna continue to cycle, just like Balin said.
Right.
It's amazing that you brought that up.
Yeah, which is why he's finding some sort of greater purpose beyond the power struggles of the two.
Are they trying to tell us that he's Snoke? Is that what they're doing?
No, he's not. No, he's not going to be Snoke.
That's one of his powers.
That's
right?
Interesting.
That's one of the big things that Snoke was doing, was looking into the future, right?
I don't know. Wasn't Snoke just like
he's taken this turn away from being this mercenary, not Jedi, not Sith person, looking at there's some kind of magic going on with this planet.
Yeah. And there's usually a physical transformation. Whether it's you know, Anakin into, you know, the charred remains of who he was into Darth, or you know, even the Emperor when he
keep dropping hints that he
electrocuted and suddenly didn't look like a senator much anymore.
Right. But I don't think Balin's Snoke. I think Snoke was just like a failed Palpatine clone or a pawn Palpatine clone.
If I was Filoni, I would take that character and bring him.
Give him some more meaning, maybe.
That character has zero meaning, exactly. In over 3 movies, he's pointless, completely.
Well, and why was he so easily vanquished? You know, if he's has a history of being good, then he's always going to be caught in the middle, because the past informs the present, and then he would be maybe susceptible to being blocked or not being fully equipped to think dark as Kylo Ren was when he killed him.
I just hope they do something with Ray Stevenson's character after his passing, but don't like.
That's what I'm saying. Too.
Yeah, I mean that would be great, because boy, his character is just fantastic. I mean, we finally found out that like a little bit about his background, and it was through Grand Admiral Thrawn when he goes, Balin Skull. Would that be General Balin Skull of the Jedi Order? Goes and he says, I parted ways with the Jedi long ago. And he goes, many have, or something like that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be the first, is what he said. Yeah.
Right.
And he's a guy who knows who people are, and he knows, now that he knows who Anakin is, he might use that to his advantage with Ahsoka. Although at this point, what could he do? She made peace with Anakin in the afterlife. So
and she still has the training.
She still watches his.
Still has the training holograms.
I let go of Anakin. Anyways, here's a hologram.
We paid this actor for how much money, and he's in 2 episodes. Bring him back for that other one. He'll be a hologram.
Yeah, that felt a little forced, if you will. Yes, they didn't need
Dean
that
Christensen
scene.
in 3 episodes. What?
Oh, now that would be great if you got it in 3, but no. I mean, the thing is, they'll want more of him, so we'll probably see more of him later, but not in this season. I think they're done with that. But yeah, the hologram, we kind of didn't need that after she made peace with Anakin at the end of episode 5, or not at the end, at the midpoint of episode 5. Having him as a hologram, it felt a little bit like, oh, we should give the fans more of Hayden Christensen that they want. Which, I mean, hey, as a fan of Clone Wars, I still love seeing him training Ahsoka like that.
Exactly. That's what I was going to touch on. Like, it just takes us back to the cartoons. Like, they used it quite a few times in Rebels and in the Clone Wars. So to have it live action, it's like, why not? Like, give Hayden something to do.
Yeah.
I have to say too, again, just some watching this, I know that, you hear about these actors and such training for a long time to do these stunt work, and sure enough, they'll have stunt people who do a lot of the stuff for them. But still, we're watching the actresses who are playing Ahsoka and Sabine do a ton of their stuff because they can't hide. Their faces are pretty recognizable, especially Sabine. She doesn't have a helmet or any kind of covering, and she's doing a lot of that stuff. And I'm very impressed by that. It gives it a more a reality that, in some respects, like in something like The Mandalorian, you couldn't find, because could be anybody under that helmet, and so I think there's those stakes come through here too, because it looks like it reminded me a little bit of, like, I think one of the reasons we applaud the Mission Impossible movies is because Tom Cruise is 16, he's still running around like a wild man, and here you've got these 2 actresses who probably trained for months, and hot damn, they're looking pretty damn good doing it all. They look like they're really fighting, and they're not holding it wrong, and they're they make believable potential killers, if you will, and applause for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. The stunt work you see with the actresses alone is pretty remarkable. You see, I remember in episode 5 they had that young Ahsoka who's flipping around, killing all those Mandalorian troopers. Good stuff. But I mean, so the action still isn't as like incredible with the lightsaber combat as it was with the prequels. But you can tell the prequels, they had like maybe 2 or 3 years to train. And that's why they were so good at, those, because you don't get the speed or the veracity of it. You get more of a slow samurai sort of feel, I think, because they, A, creative decision, and B, they just don't have the time to make those elaborate fights. So that's what they had to deal with. But I mean, I did like how they kind of introduced that slower style to it. There is more of a physicality to the Star Wars universe by blending practical with CGI and not being overly reliant on CG. Although I'm sure a good majority of this show does take place within the egg that they call it, that they film in.
To that point, that was one thing I always thought was a little bit odd in Return of the Jedi, even though it's very effective when Luke and Darth are fighting, but it was very, very Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood kind of, sword fighting or whatever, right? Where here it feels very much, again, in the sort of Kurosawa vein, where there's this Zen quality to it, and a little bit more careful movement, and almost like it's got a spirituality to it as well. Not that it's all about just me going, some of that. And don't get me wrong, I loved a lot of Return of the Jedi, and I'll never forget, talk about pausing when the Emperor is like killing Luke, and they cut to that helmet, just that helmet for like 10 seconds. It's like Batman when he discovers Miss Kitka is Catwoman in the Batman movie, and they just look at his face for 10 seconds and he doesn't move. But you've got Darth Vader going like, you could just see him thinking like, fuck me underneath this helmet.
Yeah. They ruined that with, I'm sorry, but they ruined that with the Blu-rays and the subsequent release, because they have him go, no.
Oh, really?
No!
That's right.
And then he throws him in the thing.
He would have done it quietly because he wouldn't want the Emperor to hear him.
Yeah, I know.
Or coming.
Yeah, don't you think he'd be like, no, the Emperor would have been like, what?
John, I keep throwing in these movie references for you, like the Batman Adam West Miss Kitka thing, because I know you'll laugh because you'll get them, because I know you're that kind of connoisseur. Mike, you too, for such a young fellow, but I'm always reminded of some of these things from my past and thinking like, yeah, that's kind of how it is here, and it's good in that way, or maybe not quite as good in that way.
Right. Well, I mean, it has the same influences, I think, from when you were growing up to when Dave Filoni was growing up, and he puts that, within the episode. Those are like the things he remembers as a kid outside of Star Wars, and that's the things he puts in, much like how Quentin Tarantino loves Westerns, and like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is basically like a huge homage to MeTV, so which I watched that channel. No, and I know
that's hilarious.
I'm starting to become an old man myself, because I remember as a kid I would watch Nick at Night, and on Nick at Night they'd show sitcoms from when my parents were growing up, like I Love Lucy. I remember finding that show because of Nick at Night, and I think even The Honeymooners is on Nick at Night. I could be wrong. And now I turned on Nick at Night and they're playing Friends. I'm like, oh my God. Am I that age now? And it's like, yes, you are. And then I just looked down my date of birth. But
you know what's fascinating about that show? If you watch people watch that show, they don't laugh.
No, it's
they
not
just
funny.
Stare blankly at it. I'm dead serious. Same thing with Saved by the Bell. It's like this huge thing that everybody just like loves, but they don't laugh, they don't react, they just stare blankly and are somehow entertained. I don't get it.
But you raise a good point, John, and here's where I can link it, because it's a great thought. Link it to is like so many of those sitcoms, they're joke for the sake of jokes, as opposed to being jokes that character would say, that character would make. Like you think about like going back to the original Honeymooners, and Ralph Cramton is going to go out and see a play with Norton because Alice has to stay because her mom's coming over, and it's these 2 tickets to a thriller, and his mom comes in and she bets him that he can't be quiet, and all this kind of stuff, and he's got the timer, and then the mother-in-law reveals the ending of this twist play, this mystery that Ralph is going to see, and ruins it, and then the thing goes off and he goes, "You are a blabbermouth." And what's great about that is he explodes at her, but he can't swear at her because it's still his wife's mom, so he has to be just a little bit cognizant of that. And that's Ralph Cramton. He's a blowhard, he's a rageaholic, but he's kept from being probably a killer because he's got a little sense of that, like, well, I gotta make sure that my wife stays with me or cooks my meal or goes to bed with me tonight or whatever. So it's raining. That's comedy within a character, as opposed to just let's go for the craziest thing. Because if he started just really, really going off for like suddenly he's, Oscar Wilde or, a Noel Coward being able to come up with witty names and name calling stuff, they wouldn't be him. But so many of those shows that you're talking about, people stare, it's like they're just jokes. Saved by the Bell, they were all written by one bad joke meister, and as opposed to what would this character say, what would that character say. Those aren't about character-driven comedy. They're about punchlines, and whenever you do punchlines, same here. It's like that robot is worried about if he's going to miss it, and it hurts him. It's funny to us, but it hurts him, and his pain is both kind of sad and funny, and that's that character.
That reminds me of why the Simpsons worked originally and why Family Guy doesn't work, which is The Simpsons. They have humor based on the characters, like if you have an episode about Bart, it's about how Bart, does something that's destructive and he learns his lesson, but he keeps on doing his own thing. Or episode about Homer where he's an idiot, but he's a lovable idiot, where you watch Family Guy, it's just a reference, like to reference South Park referencing Family Guy. There'd be a sequence where, they'd be sitting in the living room and,
like everybody says, that reminds me of this, and then we do that cutaway.
You think that's bad, right? And then they cut to the joke. It's just
where a joke that Sideshow Bob would say would not be said by Grandpa Simpson because they're two very distinct characters. Grandpa Simpson's memory would make him say some malapropisms that are funny, where Sideshow Bob's proclivity for the finer arts would drive him crazy. Like when he's supposed to kill Bart during the Cape Fear parody, but he can't resist doing, HMS Pinafore for him before they get to the shore. It's like that's what defeats Sideshow Bob, his need to be on Broadway.
Yeah, I mean it works because it works with the characters and how we feel about them. I mean, again, here's what works with Ahsoka, to loop all these old sitcoms back to it somehow, is that we have a show that is about a Jedi who learns how to, defend something, other than
or believe in something,
ghost.
right?
Yeah, or believe in something.
She kind of comes back to believing in.
Yeah, she comes back to
believe. It's very much like a Ronin story.
Yes, very much so.
She lost her way. She lost her friends. She's doing baby steps to get back to her way, to get back to her friends. At the end of episode 7, we're back. Like she's the head samurai again. Like she's the leader. She's
totally
the queen of the castle, whatever you want to say. She's got her left hand man and her right hand woman right next to her. She's ready to go. Like that. I cannot wait for this next episode, man. This is gonna.
I know it's gonna be exciting.
The best Star Wars that we've ever seen. Maybe some of the best science fiction that we've ever seen. Just like some of the most fun that we've ever seen. I mean. The story is going to be great, but I already know that the sound design and the music is going to be the best throughout the entire series, and it's already been fantastic. So
that's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. In fact, Mike, you and I started talking about it before we came on. Is I have to say, I mean, and this is nothing against Disney, because I think Disney pours a lot of money into things, and God knows, I mean, they made Little Mermaid look great, and sometimes when you see they really are spending the money on special effects, and you can see the difference in certain Marvel movies that spend it here. But I have to say, this one, I'm astounded at the production values. I mean, even like there's the lighting, to your point, John, about sound. The lighting in this thing, like one of the things I thought that happened a lot in The Mandalorian is like it looked like 70s Universal shows like Columbo and all those shows, which are great, but they're all overlit. Do you remember that? Every room, and I mean, when Gordon Willis did The Godfather, people are saying like, "What's so dark?" Well, it's being moody and it's sinister and it's secretive and it's
about the mafia.
Power is in the shadows, as they said in Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah.
But everything was so overlit because that's just the way it was done here. And The Mandalorian and some of the other things, you can sometimes see like, well, they didn't have money for this set, or that's too much lighting, or they didn't have time to really give it a mood or a feeling. Here, every scene seems to be really thought out, and I keep looking for like, well, they chinched on the special effects there a little bit. No,
it doesn't look cheap ever, and it could have.
The beasts look incredible. That Howler is a character in this. He's not just sort of a half-assed done Wolfie prop, if you will.
When they have to shut down power and they're like hiding within the whale bones.
Yes.
Yeah. Like there's that eerie just like feel of them sitting there just hiding, and you can see like the little schools of fish floating and eating off the, like, it's just like that's Star Wars to me. Like just the wonderment of Star Wars was like in that scene specifically where she's like Huang is like running his scene or running his scans, and she's just like sitting there waiting. Like that's the feel. That's the Filoni feel. Oh my God! I hate to keep bringing his name up, but he's brought.
Well, there was always the humor of scale in the original Star Wars too, like where suddenly you realize, oh, it's 30 Ewoks that have just toppled over this thing or whatever like that or stuff. And here, like when they're when the Howler is sniffing at that rock, and Sabine is like, oh Jesus, what are you doing? You're wasting my time, and then he's right. And then there's a number of other ones. And it's like you think about even just production value. Somebody probably was arguing, like, do we have to have 7 of them reveal themselves? Yes, because 3 isn't funny or interesting enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of times Star Wars succeeded by having more stormtroopers coming through the door, more Ewoks helping them fight the battles and stuff like that. It's really, I like the sense that there's people, there's numbers of critters and things in this world.
And to your point about the Howlers and the way that they bring those characters alive, like when she's like chastising that Howler about being like, oh, you found water, good job, and then the one pops up.
Yes.
And it's looking around. It's like, oh shit, you got me. And then a few minutes later, 7 more pop up, and the Howler's reacting to that.
Yes.
That is a great job of CGIing or whatever you want to call it, like giving life to that character.
He's doing something in the background. You're right.
It was fantastic. That was fantastic. Like I was just like seeing the reaction on an animal's face for how it screwed up was just amazing. I mean, that's just the little things like that is just fantastic.
Well, Dave Filoni comes from an animation background, so he probably understands visual effects on a technical level better than a lot of other directors would. You know, a lot of them would probably look at it and go, oh, like, this doesn't look good, change that. And the visual effects guy would look at him and go, well, that'll change everything. If we did, that'll take another week. You know, Dave Filoni realistically knows what he can put in each episode. When you get Thrawn's Star Destroyer approaching the frame, it felt so much more big and epic and meaningful than the army of Star Destroyers that Emperor Palpatine summoned in Rise of Skywalker. And it's because it's investing us in the characters and the setting, you know. And
that's an interesting point that you made about animation, because they have time to sit and look at it for a while, right? And they can keep going back and plussing it, and you get some of those habits under your belt, and you start to do that when you're even doing live action. I remember reading sort of a 20-year post evaluation of Batman the Animated Series. And of course, it got a lot of praise at the time for not only bringing characters from the comic book stuff that we'd not seen before and really developing them, but also this kind of weird Art Deco world, which was very 1930s, but also very futuristic. You know, they had black and white computers, but they still had computers, right? But one of the things that they also praised about that show, and I remember this because I was a huge fan of it when it ran in the early 90s, is they had characters in the background that were animated that reacted to stuff. You know, it wasn't just like Batman versus Mr. Freeze or something like that. If Mr. Freeze was making hay at this party and freezing the guests, you had the person he was freezing, but you had all the other people kind of reacting to it, and they would keep reacting to it. To your point, John, like the Howler is reacting in the background to all this other stuff that's going on in the foreground because he's still involved in it, even if he's not in a close-up. And they did a lot of that stuff in the Batman animated series. And I think, Pixar and all these animation things have done a lot of that since then. I think of the cat always responding in the background in Coraline, and how that character was constantly reacting to things, even though he wasn't front and center. And maybe that's a skill of the animator. Like, this is a world, we're world building here. And a world is also not just its set and lighting, but it's also the people who are populating it, and they have to have some interaction with it.
Yeah, I mean, when you have someone who actually works in animation, they can understand with the visual effects department, like, more realistically what deadlines are executable and which ones aren't. And I think with his expertise that he brings that into the show, in a very meaningful and constructive way, where you would think other visual effects or other directors with less experience in that realm would have stuff that would look maybe a little more cheap. Like, it kind of reminds me of like when Ang Lee did the Hulk. He told the CGI department, I don't want this character to look like CGI. And what was the main thing everyone joked about? It looking like CGI. So it just shows, like, you can't just have someone come in there and just bark orders and then, someone's going to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Not unless their name is Steve Jobs and they, torture their staff to make the iPhone. But yeah.
Filoni understands the clay that he's working with.
Yeah.
Like, he's looking at it frame by frame from an animator's perspective. So it's like cell by cell, frame by frame. Like, how do we make this particular scene rewatchable or just like rewatchable in your mind? Like, you don't necessarily have to rewatch it live action, but you're going to play it over in your mind and like, oh wait, this, like you're saying, like this background character was reacting to this, and you weren't focused on it at the time, but you like look back on it either the next time you watch it or when you're thinking over it in your mind, you're like, oh wow, like it really brought focus to. Then you go back and watch it again, and you focus on that character instead of the 4 character, and you kind of get like this bigger picture from the creator's stance, and
Right.
like he just understands the clay that he's working with.
I love
he
that term.
How to mold.
and it's good clay. You know, it's not the cheap clay that they handed Hanna-Barbera where they gave them no budgets once they got done at MGM with Tom and Jerry, you know, so they had to do the repeating backgrounds, and a lot of times the characters in the background were rotating with them as they're running down the street.
Clay and the kiln were made for him. Like this Disney era of Star Wars literally made for this guy. And
it's we've got the better clay here. Go to town.
Yeah. Well, he's had years to develop it and build it and know what it is. And, you know, a lot of these characters that are being interpreted for live action are his characters from animation. So he's probably had some time to think about how he would want them to look on camera, you know, to have them look believable. I mean, one of the characters that comes to mind was, it was one of the episodes in Book of Boba Fett that had nothing to do with Boba Fett because Boba Fett was boring. And that character was Cad Bane. When they brought him back, that I couldn't believe how well they made that work. And then I watched behind the scenes videos. That face is not CGI. That's a puppet. I was talking. Maybe like some of the stuff with the lips is CGI. I'm not sure. But the fact that they
prosthetics, it's a puppet. And to do what they did with that character and bring it to life the way that they did, was fantastic. Because nobody knows unless you watched 11 years of cartoons. You don't know who this guy is.
Right.
But he was literally the guy who shot Boba Fett in the head and gave him the dent in the helmet. Like they shot each other in the head. There's a whole bunch of backstory with him and Han Solo and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Cad Bane is a big deal, and they did him correctly in Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah. Up until they killed him off. You know.
He's okay.
Yeah. He's going to be the back-to-bath, so he'll be fine. You don't die if you get stabbed in the chest unless you're Qui-Gon Jinn. Like that guy just had it bad. I don't know.
Is that the Liam Neeson character?
Yeah.
See, I know a little bit more than I'm not quite.
Well, he was in the prequels, so
I'm in first grade. You guys are in the
no. He was in the prequels. He was in the prequels, you know. Which I don't know. John and I had said this for a while. Episode 1 isn't that bad. It's just, you know, it was too much build up around it, you know, because you have an amazing world that George Lucas builds. It's just that he writes flat characters around it. And he didn't have Francis Ford Coppola to come and save his ass this time. He just did it on his own. But if
the world building, the story setup, it's way too much CGI. I mean, it was Star Wars for the day. It kind of was what it was with the blue screen and everything that they were doing back then. But it is a fun movie to go back and if you can erase Attack of the Clones as its forecursor, I guess. Phantom Menace is a great movie as a standalone Star Wars film. It really is.
Yes, Phantom Menace is, I wouldn't say like a great movie, but I think it was like a good movie, you know, because they're setting up things that are going to happen. I honestly think if they just skipped episode 2 and they just went straight into episode 3 with just like a little like more story or fat place to it, you would have been fine.
Continue the storylines that they set up from the first movie.
Right.
It would have been fantastic. They just dropped all the storylines and just like did Detective Kenobi for the second movie. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
And I also think that. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, nothing. I was going to say that was the creation. It was literally just built off of one line, which was the Clone Wars. And George Lucas was like, well, I got to show him what the Clone Wars is. And then he just kind of wrote that, but they didn't write much character or anything behind it. It was just a bunch of action scenes with exposition that's leading to the third film that we could already get. And of course, you know, maybe if Dave Filoni and maybe if they had an Ahsoka at the time, the movie would have been more interesting, but we got a whiny Anakin that nobody liked.
I also think, and this is one of the problems with prequels and reboots and a lot of that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons, to your point earlier about why this I think is more compelling, is because we don't know what's necessarily going to happen to all these characters, and there's some gaps here. Because I think when you go back and tell the story about people we already know their conclusion to, it just robs it of some of the stakes, as you were talking about, John. Because like I mean, I love Mad Max Fury Road, but they're doing a prequel to that now with Furiosa's story, and that could be interesting. But I'd be more interested in what happened to her afterwards, and then they could have kept Charlize Theron in the role, and okay, so she's a little bit older and wiser too, but what's her next thing? Where does she go from here? I love Anya Taylor-Joy, but I'm going to be watching that going like, nothing really significant is going to happen to her other than we'll see how she loses her arm because she survives. And I just think if you take that out of a film and watching, oh, are we supposed to feel sorry for Darth Vader? I felt sorry for him at the end of Return of the Jedi when you realize he's a afraid old man hiding kind of behind his glory of armor and stuff. I just think that was a critical mistake. I wish somebody could have told George and all of his power then that, hey, you got a good thing going here, but you don't have to tell the prequel. Just let's keep it going. What happens next to the galaxy? Who's up? Who's down? Again, it all comes around. Maybe the good people now are becoming corrupted, and they're more like the bad guys, and allows the real bad guys to come in and take it because they've got more will. That to me would have been better, and then just continue it going on and on. And that's what some of the books, and I know the comic stuff did, as well as tell some of the better Anakin stuff. But I don't want to see Darth Vader as a kid. I'm not. Oh, he started out as a poor kid. I know Charles Manson was the unloved son of a prostitute too. That doesn't change the Tate LaBianca murders, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe he gives a little more understanding to his being shit on all his life and wanting to shit back, but it doesn't make me like him anymore.
Yeah, Darth Vader's story could have just been one movie, and that could have been it. Because like everything that you're gonna expect to have happen, or want to see have happen, or saw how it have happen, that happens all in the third film. Everything else you could have just told like in a flashback, like, okay, Obi-Wan picks up Anakin as his apprentice, and he ends up training him, and of course it doesn't work out. Okay, and he has a forbidden relationship with the senator. They could have told that like within a line, like when they had the "I'm pregnant" scene. You could have gotten it like right away who these two are, But you have to have like an entire movie build these characters, build up this romance that was horribly written. Like for some reason, Padme just suddenly falls in love with Anakin out of nowhere, although he was like creeping on her and touching her back and telling her how much she hates sand. They could have had. They didn't need to have any of that horrible love story. They could have made one movie; it would have been fine. But of course, understandably, they had to have episodes 1, 2, and 3 because they later gave the movies numbers. Star Wars was originally Star Wars. It wasn't until The Empire Strikes Back that they said episode 5 and 6. So people are going to want to go, well, what's 1, 2, and 3? And of course, that's Darth Vader's story. But without very good writing, there wasn't much to see there. And they built the world. George Lucas built something very imaginative. You had Coruscant, that was like Metropolis. You had Naboo, which was Theed, or actually Venice, and you had the Gungan Zung underworld. I can't remember. I think it was called Gunga, and Gunga is basically Aquarius. So you have all these imaginings from other worlds, other works, other authors, other filmmakers put together in this imaginative sequel that just didn't have enough meat behind the story. We didn't need to, as you said, we didn't need to see 9-year-old Anakin. We didn't need to see all those space politics about trade disputes. We didn't. Yeah. And the things we could have seen that would have made the Trade Federation look like the threat that they were, we could have seen maybe instead of like a bunch of droid battle tanks rolling into Theed, we could have had a bunch of droid battle tanks, shooting apart Naboo and destroying stuff and killing people, with bloodless violence. And we would have gotten the idea that these guys are a real threat and they have to create the clone army to stop them. But
by the way, to that, it's funny. There were some funny nods to past stuff here that I also felt like Filoni was having a little bit of fun at his predecessors' stuff too. Like I love the line where they talked about Palpatine, and then the Emperor, he was killed, right? Well, that's what some people think.
Yeah.
Like that answer 20 years ago would have been in
I
hell
did
yes.
notice that.
Yeah, but now, well, suddenly he comes back, and there's a couple of those stories they mentioned. What is the Christopher Lee's character again? He was
Count
referenced.
Dooku?
Yeah, Count Dooku. Yeah, he was referenced, and a couple of that. Even somebody like me who's not an aficionado like you guys are was catching him. I thought there was some funny little throwaways line, almost like he was having a little fun in his confident way about referencing those other things, which maybe weren't quite as successful, or were somewhat polarizing or whatever in the past, which was funny.
I'm glad you mentioned Dooku, because they gave us some great cameos in episode 6.
Yes.
Admiral Akbar.
That's right.
Episode 7. You had Admiral Akbar sitting there. Again, another puppet character that gets no voice lines. That's starting to annoy me.
Yes. Why doesn't he get to say something?
Only the humans are talking, which is really kind of bugging me.
Like
give voice lines to
she got
There's
away.
no reason not to.
When
the entirety of the Mandalorian, you got a puppet sitting there that's never going to say anything. I'm cool with that. Give some voice lines to the rest of these puppets. But anyway, you got Akbar, you got 3PO, and then you got Gideon mentioned. You got Leia mentioned.
Yep.
You got Grievous mentioned. You've got finally Asajj Ventress mentioned, and Count Dooku. Like, to have all
Easter eggs
thrown at us in one episode was kind of fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
When you might fight General Grievous or Asajj Ventress or Count Dooku, that was just to have those names thrown out there was fantastic.
Yeah, when Sadula got basically off with just a little bit of a warning, they could have had Akbar say, "It's a slap."
Yeah,
just a slap.
Say something.
Just on the wrist.
Anything.
Come on, I could write these characters.
See, now was Akbar in the council there? Was that the scene he was in? I didn't even notice. My TV's too small. But, no,
Mike,
really
we have to get you a bigger computer screen or something.
I need to get a 4K.
He's no Grand Admiral. He's just regular Admiral.
You're getting all those.
He might be a rear admiral. I don't know.
Could you imagine if I could just imagine like Admiral Akbar's Grand Admiral Thrawn then? Like, you must be the Night Sisters.
You know what I'm saying?
What trap can we set up?
Let them say something.
Whatever you're wearing, the Maybelline is not helping.
Yeah,
they were some hard-looking women. Let me tell you, they looked a little witchy. I kept thinking that's got to be an homage to Macbeth.
Oh yeah. They're definitely an homage to the witch from Macbeth. Like they're absolutely that, and that's kind of with the shaved head and everything.
Are you guys noticing the music anytime that they're on screen? It's like there's one scene where they're using their I don't know, their magic orbs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's just like this super high pitched violin squeal in the background.
Yeah, that's right.
Like so 1950s, just oh my goodness, the way that these episodes are put together with sound. Like I keep coming back to the music and this. Yes, it's Star Wars and it's lightsabers bouncing off of each other, but the sound design is amazing. I'll still come back to them hiding the lightsaber fight in the waves when Jason is searching for Ahsoka. That is incredible to me. That's just like on another level of just another. I don't even know how to describe it. It's blowing my mind.
Right. So true.
And I love Thrawn's theme that they brought back from Rebels, because Thrawn had the organ that has this very religious sort of feel to it, and it makes him just so much more menacing and scary. Like you'll just hear that organ, here comes Thrawn.
How about the fact that he's such a scary SOB, and they put him in basically a white frock? He's almost dressed like the prince from the Cinderella, the animated Disney Cinderella. It almost has that kind of feel to it. But I love the fact that he's, got the skin tone of, Mystique, and, even kind of the hair color. And then he's in this kind of British royal kind of white top and stuff, but he's scary as hell.
His stormtroopers are using I forgot the Japanese form where they're like welding their helmets back together, and they're literally tied together with strings and ropes and sashes. And his uniform is perfect. He is well fed. Thrawn is the king of that Star Destroyer. Like, they brought this character to life perfectly for live action animation. I'm loving it. Seriously.
And his number 2 guy with the face on the helmet is That's again so kabuki and everything as well, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing. It's fun when you get someone who's actually worked with the material and has had a history of delivering with the material, being in charge of something like this. It makes you wonder why Dave Filoni wasn't in charge of the movies, but that's because when Disney acquired Star Wars, they had to make their shareholders happy and release those episodes as soon as possible. And I think that's the biggest problem the sequel trilogy had, was they didn't have time. And in Ahsoka, they've had time to develop things. I mean, I will bounce back and say I do like Andor. It does drag a little bit, but as like a singular story about a man finding his purpose, it's exciting. And to see the moral gray area of the rebellion was very captivating viewing, because we never see that with the rebellion. They're always the good guys, and hey, we should root for them. But then there's that whole heist that they're having with the Imperial cargo, where they're threatening to kill a guy's kids and his wife, if they don't do what they say. Now, that kind of subtext we don't see in Star Wars much, but I could go on forever about why I liked Andor. I felt like it was Star Wars made for someone who maybe didn't like Star Wars. It was more of a political thriller. And maybe for people who like Star Wars, it felt like, well, where's the whiz-bang action? It didn't need to have that as much. Although some of the characters were a little boring to watch.
Yeah, for me, they really need to apply exactly what you said about Andor. They needed to apply that to Solo.
Yeah.
Han Solo was that guy before he met, Luke Skywalker. He was the scoundrel. He was the bad guy. They needed to apply that character template to Solo and not make him the goofball who can drive really fast.
He was too good.
His standalone movie makes no sense.
Yeah. And it wasn't even the character.
Time and there are no side characters that have been brought into the Star Wars universe from that movie. Okay, great. He met Chewbacca. Okay, so what? But we didn't see them actually meet. We didn't see them do the life death situation. They just meet in this. They changed the story of how they meet. And it's just weird, but yeah, they really needed to apply that Andor template to Solo, and that would have made for a great combination. Andor was, I disagree with you on that. It's just it's too long. They do touch on a few points which you just mentioned, like the dark side of the rebellion, and not everybody's hands are clean when it comes to murder, I guess. Which we should have known that going forward, but. They bring it full force and right in your face with Andor. They just needed to do something with that Solo show or that Solo movie to make it.
Well, they are making a Lando movie now, which I don't know how to feel about that. I think, yeah.
Again, I don't know why they have so many new characters and things they could be doing with it, and it's let's just greatest hits. It's that. Yeah, it's 40 years old. It's I don't think there's that much love for that character. And
give me a Maul movie. Everything that I've learned about Maul in the cartoons, and give me an hour and a half of that as a movie. Because people like Jeff is still not going to go back and watch 11 years of cartoons. But if we can condense the Maul story into a film, let's do that.
Yeah.
We don't need to.
You're making me want to go watch some of those animated ones, though.
We don't need an R2, origin story. Let's see how he got built on his. No, we don't need any of this bullshit. We need a Cad Bane. We need a real Boba Fett story. There's so much substance within the Star Wars universe that they're just.
That's why I wouldn't mind a season.
The mark up until Ahsoka, honestly. I really hope that this is the turning point for Star Wars, and the Rey movie coming forward makes more sense because Filoni is involved and blah blah. Let's just have Star Wars make sense instead of being a bunch of random explosions
and make them special.
Yeah.
That's what made Star Wars special in the first place. When we
specialized,
when the trilogies came out, they were special because they haven't come out in so many years. And now we get Star Wars all the time, which, hey, I'm not going to complain. I like television shows and stuff, but just like Marvel, you get so much of it, it loses its luster. And when that happens, you start to lose some faith in the fan base, and especially the Star Wars fan base with this show. I think they've mostly been positive, but you still get a lot of people who are negative Nancy's on there who kind of either some have good points and then others, they just want to.
They're the same people that refuse to watch the cartoons because they're cartoons. I can't watch it.
That's right.
Then you missed out on the story leading up into Ahsoka, and you're not going to get it. Stop complaining. Yeah. It was there for you. You were warned that Ahsoka was coming. You could have brushed up on some stuff. Stop complaining.
Yeah. Well, not to mention that
it's so dumb to be complaining about that stuff. Like, I don't get it. Well, waste my time then, I guess.
And if you go on Disney Plus and look up the Clone Wars, there's like a section where you could just skip straight to the episodes that are part of the main story instead of all the filler.
Years where nothing happens.
Yeah.
Like, 2.5 seasons, almost nothing happens. You can skip that. If you don't know that, then you're going to be wasting your time.
Yeah. Well, luckily there's like the main episodes. Like there's like a little sub tab in Disney Plus where it's like, go to this episode if you want to find out what happened to Darth Maul. Go to this episode of blah 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 blah. So they do have that option. And luckily with Ahsoka, I never feel like this show is like dragging on too long or anything like that. I mean, if anything, maybe I'll push back on that. I'd say a little bit of episode 7. That whole chase with the little turtles and the bandits along with the stormtroopers, like that scene kind of went on for a little too long for me. It could have been trimmed down, but I mean overall we're kind of comparing apples to oranges here. It's not it's a pretty satisfying series structurally and stylistically, and if it's going up from here, I'm wondering what the finale will be. I'm going to guess Thrawn hyper drives his way out of that galaxy into the new one, and then Ahsoka and Sabine and Ezra chase after him. They start season 2. Yeah,
we're going to Lothal. I don't know if you guys noticed this. I wish I would have shared it earlier, but the opening and closing sequence of the show. Right, like Game of Thrones thing where they're like following the lines. That is literally the storyline. You're going from planet to planet, and you're seeing. So when you at the end of when the episode's over, and you see them come from the other universe or the second galaxy back home, you can see them first arriving at an outer rim planet, which let's hope to God is not Tatooine. It has to be Lothal. It's obviously got to be Lothal. But we're finally going to see Lothal in live action, and I cannot wait for that.
And which one is Lothal again? I'm trying to remember.
That's where Ezra is from.
Well, wait.
It's his home, where Bendu was, and like that one Jedi temple that Kanan and him unlocked.
Yeah, that's just kind of like another random Star Wars planet with a lot of, sand.
No, it's a desert planet, but it's not Tatooine, and it's Ezra's home planet. It's something that we haven't seen yet.
I thought Sabine was in Ezra's home in the first episode when she's like in that place. She was in there and watching his hologram.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. That is.
Yeah, I think
we're returning to Lothal, which is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it should be fine. Another desert planet. Why not? Like, I've seen so much sand. I understand why Anakin hates sand. It's not that cinematically interesting to see.
And it is annoying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, if these things that's bad, they should have been on the what's the name of the planet in Dune? Oh, is it Dune actually?
I think it's Dune.
Arrakis.
Oh,
it's Arrakis.
Okay.
Arrakis. The dunes are the actual.
Yeah, like the seas. So.
And when's that movie coming out? March. Well, wait till March.
Oh,
they fucked that up huge. You can't split that in half.
Well, that's the biggest problem with it is like Warner Brothers. I think it was Warner Brothers did that one, right? Mm-hmm. They kind of lost their will or something. They decided to only do half the book, and then we'll see how it does. It's like, why would you ever just do half the book and not? I mean, if you're going to do it, do the whole first book, and you can still split it if you want, but you have to produce the whole thing. It's like, well, we'll wait and see if we do the second half of the book. I don't understand that kind of decision making.
No,
it's
the
like
second half of the story is the story.
Exactly, and it ends on the most anticlimactic nothing. And I just don't understand how that kind of person becomes a studio head. I do not understand. To me, that is not an entertainer. That's the thing we can bitch about LB Mayer and some of those people. I know, but that's the problem is back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, the people who were heading up studios came from the theatrical world, the vaudeville world. They were entertainment. They were showmen. LB Mayer may have been a prick, but he was a showman. He knew how to cast right and get good stories and get good people do it. And he wanted it done right. Now it's just they're money men and they're bean counters, and they think, oh, well, if Dune's successful, then we'll do the second half and people go see it. It's like that's just dumb storytelling.
Yeah, I don't. It feels like they just kind of stretched out the storyline from the first film.
It was really well done, but it's like just do the whole thing, do the whole first book.
I don't think they stretched. It's a gigantic story. I mean, the book is like a foot thick. Like you literally can't tell that story. That's why everybody was complaining about the Lynch version, because it's so condensed. Unless you watch the 4.5 hour version, you're just not going to understand what's going on.
But see, I would also suggest, and this is one of the things that I think we've now in a different world, is with binge showing and stuff like that, people will sit and watch a show for 8 hours, And I remember literally 30 years ago when Nicholas Nickleby was on Broadway, the Royal Shakespearean Company did it in England and they imported it to New York. It was, I think, 12 hours. And they were 2 6-hour shows, and you sat for 3 hours and then they had intermission, and then you came back after an hour or 2 hours, what it was, and you watched the rest of it, and you did the whole show in 2 very long days, and it made a king's ransom. I mean, people will sit for sports. They'll watch football all Saturday, 2 games for college and 2 on Sunday. It's like, I think they could have done Dune and said, yes, it's a 5-hour movie and you're going to love it. And it's going to feel like a 2.5-hour movie because it's going to move and it's going to be exciting. It's going to look like an incredible thing. And that sound design is going to wash over you and all that. But somebody goes, well, people aren't going to sit for this. I mean, it's, Harvey Weinstein saying, well, we can't show Kill Bill as a 3-hour movie. It's got to be cut in half. It's like, really? That could have worked as one movie. Just make it a good 3-hour movie.
I think people wouldn't have seen it if the movie was like 5 hours. I mean,
I think they would today. I think for Dune, I think it would be like an event and give it an intermission. I mean, Sound of Music, Dr. Zhivago, those things. It's a Mad World was a 3-hour comedy in its day in 1963, and it came with a 20-minute intermission.
Yeah. See, I just wonder if it would make as much money though, because I mean, I know Martin Scorsese is releasing Killers of the Flower Moon, and that movie's 3 hours and 26 minutes, which I don't know. As an Irishman,
it's a long story. It's a long story though. I think it needs that time. We'll see. I don't know if it's his second to last film or whatever.
I mean, the Irishman
make the time for it.
Yeah, the Irishman also felt
the content is there.
Yes,
it can be just like you said. It can be 6 hours. It can be 12 hours long. It can be 24 hours long. But if it's just a bunch of nothing, like the first half of Dune is, like literally the first half of that movie is a bunch of stuff that happens. It doesn't get good until he crash lands in the desert and shit hits the fan for him. Are we ever going to see that? We might not even ever see that.
And they cut away from the big battle, which
David Lynch movie, and get the completion of the story. Or if you go back and read the book, which it's 2023, nobody's going to do that. We know that.
Well, the other thing too that always strikes me about some of these things is I don't understand why there's a resistance to do animation. Animation is so it can tell a $400 million story, and you can do so much with it. And it doesn't all have to look like Pixar. It doesn't have to look like kiddie stuff. And you can world build and all that. And I'm not saying that Dune isn't terrific on a number of levels, but can you imagine if somebody said, rather than spending $300 million on a film, we're going to spend $150 million on an animated version of it, and we're going to make it the same scale that you'd see in a big, screen and the sound design and all that, but we're going to literally create it and do this kind of adult animation for it. They should start doing some things like that. There's the horror genre could be told in animation, and there's horror comics at work that have scarier stories and thrillers and stuff like that. I just think that's one of those things that's untapped. And as you were just saying for the last few episodes, the animated series, I think after the original 3 films, was the best of the Star Wars stuff. And it's, they laugh and deride it. Oh, it's kiddie stuff. No, it's not. It's really well done storytelling. And the people who work in the animation thing, be it Batman, the animated series, or the Star Wars stuff or whatever else, are doing incredible work.
It doesn't matter if it's made for kids, if it's engaged. I'm sorry.
It's like Rebels is some of the best Star Wars available. There's 4
Yeah.
series, 4 seasons of it. It's super condensed. There are episodes that kind of stray away from things and make no sense. There's one episode where they're focused on this, like, I think it's like 5 or 6 droids out in the middle of the desert, and they're lost, and they're like questioning reality and whether or not they're even exist.
That was the Clone Wars.
Was that Clone Wars? Or
yeah, the one with the frog guy who's like real insecure.
They can take sidetracks with animation and do things that they can do with animation that they can't do in live action. Yeah. And I really think that Star Wars is like, this era of Star Wars is going to bleed over, and we're going to get a combination of live action animation with CGI, with live action, all in one thing, and have complete story. Because, like,
and you know what the example is, John? The Avatar movies. It's almost all animation, and it doesn't look like Pixar. It doesn't look like a cartoon, and yet that's animation. Mm-hmm. That's that just opens the door for all different other kinds of styles that they can use, and you can make it look realistic if you want, or you can make it stylistic. I mean, I don't understand this. And animation makes money. It almost always makes money because there's a novelty to it. It's fresh and it's different. Yeah, and generally appeals to, you know, the 4 quadrants, as they are called.
Yeah. But having said all that, I think we can all unanimously say we're happy with Ahsoka 6 and 7. We're excited to see where 8 goes. I certainly am. I have an idea that Thrawn's going to get out of there, and then it's going to be like oh no, we got to go get him sort of motivator to get to the next season. But yeah, I'm excited to see where they're going to go from here. Before I take off, I'd like you guys to plug your stuff away. So, Jeff, go ahead and plug away.
Well, you can see that I think it's been 13 years now. I've been writing for the establishingshot.org. That's my movie blog. I do caricatures of the movies or TV shows that I really like a lot. I did one of Ahsoka. I was going to give it to you, John, if you wanted it. I'm now doing TikToks each week about one movie that I like, Two with the Droid, and showing how that's done a little bit. And I do essays about the film and film world in Hollywood for PipelineArtists.com. It's a creative magazine online, and I'm also on Rotten Tomatoes if you want to find me and all my catalog of things I've written there. So and I'm guesting on this wonderful show, and often on Kicking the Seed, and sometimes on Cinema Jaw and other places. But wonderful to be sitting here with you guys on this. Maybe after this, we'll talk about the Fall of the House of Usher, Mike. I know you like horror. Now that John does too.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. Just a thought.
Yeah. But we'll see how drowned I am in screenings.
I know it comes out in the middle of October, right in the thick of it all.
Oh yeah, you'll just see, if you just
on Netflix. 8 episodes.
One of these episodes of the show, you just see me crying, trying to write everything.
Yes. But anyway, that's my story. So go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Cinema Obscura. We are the world's only library of independent film. Can TV every Monday night at 11 o'clock here in Chicago. You can find us. An hour of independent shorts, music videos, documentaries, animation, web series, all of it collected in one spot. We have archives on Vimeo and a live show at the Logan Theater every 4th Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Come check us out. We do a lot of good stuff.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
And if you want to check out my stuff, I'm at YPA Reviews on social media with TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find all my reviews for the newest stuff at ypareviews.com, whether it's a new independent movie that you might not hear of or a new big budget feature that you want to be aware of. I know we talked about The Creator at the beginning, and I liked it, but didn't love it. And I'm starting to teeter on not liking it, but whatever. I had to get the review off.
Influence over you, young Mike Crowley.
Yes.
You're going to despise it by the time I'm done with you.
I haven't seen it. I don't know if I will, but it's not a Neil Blomkamp movie that's trying to be a Neil Blomkamp movie, so I might just pass.
It started out like Robert Garland and ended up being Michael Bay, which is not a good transition.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good way to define it.
Yeah, lots of explosions. Like, really? I mean, the designs are right out of Ex Machina, and there's, that kind of intellectualism going on there. But quickly, it's like, let's just start blowing shit up.
Yeah, I kind of knew they were going to do that because Gareth Edwards is like that. He likes to introduce characters in interesting settings, and then he ditches it to do all cool. I know everybody loves Rogue One. Apparently, everybody but Rogue One didn't have very interesting characters, and the most interesting parts of that movie were the parts that had nothing to do with the characters. It was just Darth Vader killing people in hallways and big space battles and stuff like that. But again, what was like the lasting impression on what that movie meant? Not much at all. And that's kind of Gareth Edwards' main problem with his movies. He's great at visual effects, but not very good at storytelling. But that's a very, I guess I probably lost all the Star Wars fans after saying I didn't like Rogue One that much. But it's true. I found it kind of boring.
Well, it's not as good as Ahsoka.
Yeah, it's not as good as Ahsoka. But anyways, if you guys liked what you saw, please subscribe to YPA Reviews. Check out Jeff York at Establishing Shot and John Davies at Cinema Obscura. All of their information for their stuff is in the description of the video. So please go check that out. And we will see you next Thursday with the finale of Ahsoka. Until then, we will see you later. And goodbye. And may the Force be with you.